How cool would it be to be able to swing around? I think it'd be cooler than flying.
It would certainly be cooler than flying. There'd be no point. Well, that's kind of the shitty thing about the web wings. Is like there's no point in having the web wings when you can swing around.
Well, you got a little glide action in there, a little Batman style.
I mean, yeah, but I'm gonna prioritize. Not even prioritize. I'm not gonna use the web wings. I'm swinging. If I have the web shooters, actually, you know what? You know when I wouldn't use the web wings is if I'm out of web fluid. It's the only scenario.
Sure.
It's the only reason you use
In a
them.
pinch, you'd use them, but if you didn't have to, you wouldn't.
Swinging and slinging, baby.
All right, I like your style, but I always like to add a little more to the bag, like in the Spider-Man game, PS5 game, when you have the web wings. I was using them quite a bit to just like glide around the city. I like the feeling of kind of the wind taking you places.
Yeah. I mean, what's cooler is not the wind taking you places, but you slinging webs and taking yourself places. However, you probably
I'll
didn't
concede
notice. I finally finished off the platinum for Spider-Man 2.
Did you?
Yeah. I haven't had the copy of Spider-Man 2 for so long, so I haven't been able to finish it, but now that we watched Spider-Verse, I was like, oh, I should finish off the platinum for I had kind of forgotten about it, but that brought it back and I was like, might as well polish that one off.
I think I'm still slacking on the Spider-Man PS4 platinum.
What?
Yeah.
No way. That one's so easy. Honestly, you're probably almost done.
I think there's just something odd I'm missing.
But yeah, that's not the Spider-Man we're here to talk about today, is it?
It is not the Spider-Man we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about a much younger iteration of the web slinger.
Mm-hmm.
That is Miles Morales.
Yes, sir. Into the Spider-Verse, or how do you call them as a series? I guess the
Spider-Verse duology at this point, soon to be trilogy. Yeah, today we're digging into Spider-Verse. What makes it great or not so great? I guess our discussion will help us come to a verdict on that.
Mm-hmm.
But at face value, I was happy to rewatch it. I wasn't super familiar with the second one, Across the Spider-Verse.
Forgot you'd seen it.
Yeah. I guess it didn't really leave a memorable mark whenever I had seen it initially. But I enjoyed it the second time around for sure. There were bits and pieces that I remembered.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it was sort of like seeing it for the first time again, which was nice and sort of a fresh take on it for the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's nice to have that. A lot of the stuff we've been taking a look at so far, we've both already seen. So even though you'd seen it, it was nice that you had a bit of a step back to it.
Yeah, it was less of a trip down memory lane and more of like a fresh perspective on it.
Yeah. One of the reasons we watched this movie, or watched it now anyways, is due to a comment we received on a previous episode. And the question I'll summarize was basically, how do we feel about when animation should be used in movies and what it might add or take away from film, or when animation is best for a film of any genre?
Yeah, that's a multifaceted question. It's complicated. I think there's been not necessarily a stigma around animation, but just animation itself has been categorized into something that maybe is taken less seriously than these Golden Globe type winning dramatic movies. I think Spider-Verse was monumental in that regard, putting it sort of on the map with, showing it can be really impactful to use animation and still have a compelling plot and compelling characters that are emotional and have layers and can make you feel and are impactful to the overall story. And I don't think necessarily like we look at, animated shows and stuff like Family Guy and The Simpsons, and you can understand why animation maybe wasn't put in the same category as, let's get these A-list actors together and make, we have a great script here and we can make a good movie. why can't it be animated at that point?
Mm-hmm. So you'd say it's not the animation never makes or sells a movie. It's more if you have the right story behind it and you have the right, vision behind it, then despite it being animated or not, you can make a great movie. But at the same time, animation can't just save a bad script or save a bad
absolutely.
Vision.
It goes both ways, right? And you are kind of catering to a certain audience immediately off the bat. Like if people don't want to see animation or they want real live action stuff, then but that's not the audience you're going for necessarily, but you are showing that audience that, these things can be done. So if you can get over the fact that, these aren't necessarily real live actors and look at the story that's underneath, then I think this is a perfect example of something that can shine through that aspect of kind of downplaying what animation could be for a film.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think to answer the second part of the question, I don't think it takes away anything. In fact, I think it can add a lot to a great script and a great story.
Mm-hmm.
And this was especially significant because it was an extreme art style too, right? It wasn't like when we talked about, The Simpsons and Family Guy and those things we think of when we think animated television or movies. It's much different than that too, right? It's much more the comic book style, that aesthetic shining through. So it's even in a realm of its own in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it did shots that no other movie or show would have done or maybe would have even thought to do. Like the biggest one being the frame rate of I think it was just the first one. The second one there might have been parts that it was different, but the first one anyway, like the characters were filmed at half the frame rate that the setting is shot at. So you get that like comic booky, those pauses and kind of stops and like the awkward
they're moving moments in between through the world almost.
Yeah, exactly.
As if they're transitioning between comic panels almost into the next illustration.
And it's the kind of thing that like it doesn't take away from any other animated movies that didn't do that. It's more you don't really see a reason to do it unless it's artistically for this comic book style. Like there wouldn't be a lot of place for that in a conventional animated movie.
Yeah, I mean every movie has a visual aesthetic, right? This is just this movie's visual aesthetic. If you just understand it, if you don't look at the animated aspect of it as like so overwhelmingly, I can't watch this because it's animated, like it's just a different visual medium than maybe you're used to. But it doesn't take away anything from the story that's underneath it.
Yeah.
And the way they use color and stuff too is great. I especially think of in the first movie when Miles goes to the graveyard and tries to get some guidance from Peter, who's now dead. It's snowy in the city and it's kind of black and white. I guess the absence of color, right? And then those pops of color and those onomatopoeias, those crashes and booms and thwips, and yeah, it's very punchy and grabs your attention in that way.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean it's it's a good, the way you put it with the absence of color is a good example because it reminds me of like Spider-Man Noir in this movie. Like he's completely absent of color and then he's so fascinated by the Rubik's Cube, which is a brick of color basically.
Mind-boggling to him.
Yeah. But there's other, it's not just him. That's probably the most obvious one. But each of those spider people and really each character has kind of its own unique animation style. Yeah,
you have Spider-Ham with the like big wooden mallet.
Yeah, and even just like the outline of him and his silhouette, or it's very unconventional. And
Penny Parker's is much more cyberpunky, from the future. Like Spider-Ham is kind of like Looney Tunesy animation. Spider-Man Noir is like, like old gothic, like Batman style comic
Mhm.
animation.
Yeah, and it kind of adds to what you said about how like the animation does add to this movie because you couldn't do those like unique styles. You couldn't differentiate the characters between their different character style, like the way they're shot in, certainly not in a live action movie, and you probably wouldn't do it in any other animated movie. But in this, it works. It's seamless. Like you wouldn't. There's no jarring change or anything about it. They did a really good job of just blending this all together, so it looks right. But it's very distinct and it's noticeable looking back at it. I mean, at the time when I was watching it, I maybe didn't clue into, the slightly different animations because it is generally similar. Like they all follow the same motif. But looking back on it now, it's like, yeah, they each really have their own. And I guess that's amplified in the second one, Across the Spider Verse, when they're fighting the paper vulture.
Yeah,
Like that's the big okay.
straight
Here's
out
like
of
the
Leonardo da
mixing
Vinci
animations.
sketchings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they turned the knob up to 11 on that one for sure. Saw what they did with, probably inspired by, like we were talking about the first one, that kind of they were touching on, scratching the surface maybe with that, adding these elements of different aesthetics that help like develop the uniquities of the characters too, right?
Mm.
And then we see that, like you said, and then we see that again, like you said, later in the second with the paper vulture, where it's like a much more exaggerated representation of that.
There's a bunch more examples of that, not necessarily for the different characters in the different universes, but in within Miles' universe, like they have those unique, the very unique character designs. Like Kingpin, for example, his mass is so
Towering,
yeah,
menacing
you can see
figure.
how big he is.
Yeah, it makes him intimidating as a character, seeing his size.
Mhm.
So that helps convey, the threat that he poses to the overall plot and Miles himself.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's not just the way he's, of course he's physically bigger than the other people and he's taller than the other people, but it's the way it's shot with like the close-ups and
His width.
on him. Yeah, he takes up the whole frame and
Yeah.
it's like there's no air coming through, no light coming through behind him. It's he is the frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a very very unique way of putting it. And it works
Yeah, I
for that
like
like
it.
comic booky style. Like that feels like how he would be drawn in the comics.
Yeah, in a very exaggerated way. Again, like the
Mhm.
paper vulture, like you're getting these aesthetics that are, they're the artists are so probably feel so liberated to convey their art style in such a unique way that hasn't been necessarily done before, or at least on the big screen. So it's beautiful. Like it's there's something really magical about art. I think humans have a connection with visual art as a medium,
Mm-hmm.
and this hit the mark for me in that
Yeah,
respect.
it's no exception.
Yeah. Yeah, touching a little more on like the animated style, the art design, the aesthetic. Like, what do you think of the use of comic panels for transitions? To me, it was almost like flipping chapters through a book. Like, how does that help the structure of it, sort of like progressing us as a viewer through the story?
Yeah, I mean, exactly like you said, like flipping through the chapters of that comic book. Like it's that visual indication that we're moving from one scene, one area, one not one story, I guess still the same story, but one place to another. Um but yeah, it's done as seamlessly as everything else in this movie. Like it fits that aesthetic. You can feel like when those comic book panels come up, you're stoked. It's sick.
You don't feel like it could be like, I'm thinking as if it could be kind of pandering, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I can analyze a movie to understand like the sections of it in the beginning and the middle and the end type of thing.
Well, I think it is pandering but it's not like in an offensive way.
Right.
It's not pandering in the sense that like you're holding the viewer's hand and walking them through this whole thing. It's pandering in the sense that like this is a comic book movie. We're acknowledging that this is a comic book movie, and we're going for the aesthetic of comic books. It's not necessarily.
Yeah, it's done in a visual
It's not
manner.
supposed to be like a movie necessarily. It's not. It's a little off the mark from an animated movie. Even like it is kind of its own.
Yeah, it's like
its
a
own
comic book
take.
come to life, sort of.
Yeah, yeah. It's if those pictures were drawn in 3D space with movement, this is what that would look like.
Yeah.
But and like you mentioned with the onomatopoeia and stuff too coming up, the booms and bangs and all that. It's so well done.
Yeah, it's bombastic. It's like it's compelling. It draws your eye to the screen, and I think that's in today's age. That's probably the most people crave that engagement, that attention. So it helps deliver in that respect.
Yeah, it certainly does. And the music too. Like aside from the animation, the visual storytelling, and all that, the music in this movie, the score and the soundtrack really are exquisite.
Well curated soundtrack, but yeah, score for sure in terms of like a hero story, very climactic at moments, and then when he's kind of having his sense of doubts and stuff, the sort of mysterious tones, and really helps convey Miles's emotions throughout his transformation to become Spider-Man, and him realizing, what that means and what he's responsible for, and what he ultimately needs to do to pick up the mantle.
Mm-hmm. And with the animation style, each character kind of has their own theme a little bit too. I mean, between the spiders, it's a little different, but like the Prowler, for example, is a very distinct.
Yeah, it scares the hell out of you right off the bat. It's very horror-y. Like very like loud kind of alarm kind of bell sounds.
Yeah.
Like a fire alarm going off, sort of.
Yeah, you feel like
sense of panic.
There's an emergency. Yeah, a sense of panic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's done. It fits the character really well.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I didn't notice, but I'm sure there is something like when it's scenes between Aaron and Miles, when Aaron isn't acting in the capacity of the Prowler. Is there like a little bit of an
underlying
score
I feel like there's a bit of a mix between the two. Like they have kind of Miles has his own theme, Aaron has his own, and when they're together, they have
in those moments.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I could just be making that up, but no, I feel like that there is a difference between, ever so slightly, anyway. So we talked about how distinct the aesthetic of this movie is, and that really is the case for all Spider-Man movies and medium. They all kind of have their own
vibe, their own feeling.
Yeah, their own feel to them.
But it was cool to see different blends mixed into this one.
Yeah.
Like this one not only had its own, but also like incorporated some other aspects like we were discussing.
Yeah, exactly. So what, if you could pick any Spider-Man medium, any movie, any show, any game, whatever you like, what would be your dream Sinister Six? Mixing any characters.
It's an overwhelming amount of, there's a lot of Spider-Man to go around.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of villains, a lot of huge rogues gallery.
Yeah.
And different iterations of those characters as well. Like how many different Green Goblins have we seen? Yeah,
there's so many different versions of each character.
Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, that's I'll have to go, I mean, first off the bat, whenever you ask me that, the first thing that comes to mind for me is Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. From Tobey Maguire's universe.
Yeah, always a good pick.
Yeah, like it's such a tortured take on it, like this mental warfare that's going on inside this guy's head, and it seems like Willem plays it as if that side of him, Norman Osborn's side, is like genuinely scared of like these inner demons that physically present themselves as the Green Goblin.
Mm-hmm.
And just like his maniacal kind of like lust for chaos, and he's so unpredictable, and then thankfully we got to revisit him in the newer Spider-Man with Tom Holland
No Way
there.
Home.
So I was pumped for that, and I thought he really delivered his signature Willem Dafoe performance.
Yeah, that made his character, his Green Goblin, even better than it was in the Tobey Maguire.
I'm glad that he could see that it wasn't like I like left this character behind years ago. I don't want to revisit that. I'm glad he was on board and like to do
Let's
his
revitalize
character, like a tip of
this
the cap.
character. Yeah.
Because it was so good. Yeah, so that would be my in no order, I guess, but that would definitely be like a first thing that comes to mind for me is that version of Green Goblin on my Dream Sinister Six team.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the other slots of the roster, I'd also have to put in Kraven the Hunter from the comic series Kraven's Last Hunt.
Classic.
That's where he actually takes on the mantle of Spider-Man at one point too. Like Kraven dons the costume. And it's like in the symbiote days, so it's like Peter's having a tough time with adjusting to an alien life form taking over his consciousness and actions and stuff.
That seems like a Tuesday for old Spidey.
But yeah, Kraven's badass in that run. It's one I haven't read a whole lot of Spider-Man comics, but it is one that I remember reading when I was younger, and it leaving an impression for me in terms of just Kraven's like raw strength, and he's a clever guy too, you know, smart, stealthy hunter. So yeah, Kraven would have to be a pick. I love his costume too, and I thought he was done pretty well in the new Spider-Man game on PS5. I like to see him in the mix, so he'd be on the roster as my second slot, in no particular order.
Sure.
Third slot would have to be Vulture from Tom Holland universe.
Okay.
Adrian Toomes, played by Michael Keaton.
Yeah. Super intimidating.
Yeah,
character.
menacing nature, super intimidating, but he can also be just like the dad, right?
Yeah.
Like the
silly old dad joke.
Yeah.
Guy.
So there's that unpredictability to him too. And I could really understand where he was coming from in the movies too. Like his motivations made a lot of sense from a human perspective. So he's a character that I could, is a little bit more morally gray than possibly other versions of Vulture. So I like him on there. Fourth slot would be another callback to the PlayStation 5 game. It'd be Lizard.
Okay, yeah.
I just love Lizard's design in the PS5 game.
Yeah.
And, to get to see his scientific Kirk Connors side of it, he seems like a good family man and a good dad, despite his transformations into a beast. But yeah, he was sick in that. I love the sequence where you're kind of like surfing on him through the water under the bridges and stuff. And
that's funny, though.
Yeah, I like Lizard. I've always liked Lizard, but I've never really had a compelling Kurt Connors. But the PS5, they added some humanity and stuff to him and made him more of a, again, similar to Vulture, more of a morally gray.
Well, it's hilarious that you say that, because that was exactly my thoughts with coming up with my six. Is I love Lizard. It's such a sick character.
Yeah.
And I want to do a version of that, but honestly, there aren't a lot of, outside of comics, which I haven't read enough of to really grab on to one particular Lizard.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Spider-Man PS5 one wasn't even on my radar.
Okay.
But that would be a good pick for, I omitted Lizard completely because I was like, there's not really one to choose from, but
I like it because it's
would be good.
In his lizard form, he's just like this beast that could be sicked on people, right? Like he doesn't have a lot of awareness about him. But then when he reverts back to Kirk Connors form, just wrestling with what you've just done as this mutated version of yourself and killing all these people, causing destruction and stuff, has got to be, how do you live with yourself after that? And he's an interesting character to me. Because he can go both ways, right? He can just be that rampaging. I was thinking of Rhino too.
Yeah.
But then I was like, because he can just be he doesn't seem like the brightest, the sharpest tool in the shed. So he could be manipulated and just in the similar way, kind of sicked on people, cause a lot of damage. But I like Lizard because he has that underlying, he's this seemingly good guy in his human form that's just been dealing with, these transformations and how to come to terms with that, and people taking advantage of that form of him, like Craven did in the PS5 game.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd be on my team, and rounding it out with the 5th and 6th slots, I'd have Doc Ock, again from Tobey Maguire's universe.
Okay.
Big fan of that Doc Ock. I thought he was great. I can't remember the actor's name.
Alfred Molina.
Yeah, he killed it. And again, like, I guess similar to Willem Dafoe, right? Like, I like those those iterations from Tobey Maguire's universe, Sam Raimi's universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked, again, to see them come back in Tom Holland's movie there.
Mm-hmm.
And then last but not least would be an all-time favorite stemming from way back, old PS2 game, Ultimate Spider-Man. It's going to have to be Venom.
Oh, yeah.
On there. That version of Venom.
Yeah. That's a fucking dope-ass character. That's a great pick.
Yeah, just undeniably awesome.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I didn't play enough of that game to probably truly grasp the scale of his awesomeness. It's something I'll have to return to, but even the impression he left on me back then with, the little bit I could complete of that game, he's on my roster for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's a fucking G. Yeah, there is no better Venom in my opinion than that one. That's the ultimate Venom, dare I say.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't crazy. I don't know about you, but I wasn't crazy about Tom Hardy's renditions of him.
Garbage. You're being too nice. Not crazy, but they're terrible.
Imagine
putting those on the tier list. They'd be in the trash can.
Yeah, I would agree they'd be lower on the tier list for sure. They would definitely be rounding out the bottom. So yeah, I mean, I love Venom as a character, so that was a shame to see how those films went.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think we're both in agreement that Ultimate Spider-Man Venom is like the ultimate Venom.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to my list then. Again, in no particular order, but number 1, Ultimate Spider-Man Venom is in there, of
Beautiful.
course,
So
for all the reasons we mentioned.
Yeah.
Next up, this one bit out of left field, but I gotta say it's a great pick. Spider Slayer, like the robot.
Oh yeah.
Spider Slayer.
Yeah. The
but
J. Jonah Jameson on
J. Jonah Jameson, but I want J.K. Simmons, J. Jonah Jameson
in the Spider Slayer.
Yeah. I want him in the driver's seat because that's just too. It's too good.
Yes,
too good.
That's an unbelievable pick. I love it.
And then as we get deeper into the list, I got a little more crafty with it. I tried to think of like how this team would work together.
Okay, some synergy.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So yeah, Venom obviously tanky build. Mm-hmm. Big character.
Yep.
Take a lot of damage.
Bulky brawler.
Yeah, Spider Slayer a little smaller but can throw out a lot of damage. And then I have the Into the Spider-Verse Green Goblin, the big mutant Green Goblin with wings.
Fire-breathing dragon.
Yeah. Because that's, do some AoE damage, get all that, get the guys out of there, be able to fly over obstacles.
Absolutely.
And then
catch up with Spider-Man as he's swinging around.
Mm-hmm. Next up, I had Taskmaster.
Oh, interesting pick.
I was kind of struggling with which version of Taskmaster to pick, but at the end of the day, I think I ended up with the Spider-Man PS4 one.
Yeah, I almost forgot he was in there.
I know, right? It's just like a side quest, and it doesn't really add much to his character.
Yeah.
But I think that whole side quest was kind of building for something they didn't really end up doing in Spider-Man PS5. They just didn't go that direction.
You thought there could be a better climax.
I think there was supposed to be, because the boss battle or whatever with Taskmaster is not particularly hard, and it's not supposed to be. No. And it doesn't end with anything. Like, it's just Taskmaster says he'll be back or whatever, or he's got to do some more research.
Right.
But anyways, I think I go with that skills. One. Because I think he's been just doing research in the background on all this shit. All these different Spider-Men from all these different universes.
I like that. Yeah, he's the perfect, creating the perfect balance. Perfect mirror.
So he's got all that data. And then that brings me into number 5, which is Doc Ock.
Nice.
Also Alfred Molina.
Hey,
That's how I
okay.
knew so quickly what his name was. I had to
Beautiful.
look it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, he'd be in there. Smart guy, kind of rounds out the team. Can kind of rally the troops, and well, maybe he's a bit of a nerd, but
I think he'd be a leader amongst those picks.
exactly, yeah. So I think I was grappling with doing the PS4 version of Doc Ock too, but I was like, no, it's a little
choice.
too similar to what he actually does in that game. So I was like, no, MC off Molina, or not MCU, but Tobey Maguire off Molina, and then the last one. MCU Ned Leeds as Hobgoblin. I want to see that so bad.
Something that still possibly could happen in canon to that MCU.
Yeah. But yeah, big. I was thinking him big, like support guy, can make all the gadgets and all the tech, and kind of assist. Him and Doc Ock can cook together in the lab and come up with some abilities. And
I see what you're saying.
And then Taskmaster can kind of put everything into practice, create a plan. And then Venom and Green Goblin are just fucking tanks that you can throw out there and let them work. And then Spider-Slayer, just like big damage guy. Take orders and do your thing.
Wow, you really thought this out, like you said, in terms of like characters working with characters, their skills synergizing well together. That's impressive. I'm happy you thought of it this way. Mine was just more of like a most endearing picks from the past history of like Spider-Man. Yeah. But I do like how I had like we both had like a good mix of mediums in there too, between live action and illustrated and
animated, whether it's games or movies.
Yeah, that's good. And I like that we both connected on the two picks there, the Venom and the Doc Ock.
Yeah.
Both memorable iterations of famous characters for sure.
Yeah, two of the best.
Well, it's interesting that Ned Leeds as Hobgoblin too, because that may be even more likely to happen in universe now, given Peter's trajectory as like no one knows who he is now. He's a lone wolf Spider-Man. So Ned would have a much different situation where he doesn't have his best friend anymore. He's kind of a lone wolf, but I think he'd struggle with that, maybe from what we've seen, like the anxiety of it all. And, Peter's maybe a little more adept at having some charisma to, like, make some friends and stuff, if he were in Ned's case.
Well, and it's more just that, like, Peter made the choice to do this, right? Like, Ned doesn't know that this was the
He's just been
side
abandoned.
Of it. Yeah. Like, Peter has chosen to depart from this. He has, like, you can draw some solace or confidence from that. But that's just like, he lost.
Yeah. And that could push him into becoming something darker, more sinister.
Yeah. I mean, we already know he's got some magic in him, so.
He's got some, Hobgoblin doesn't traditionally have magical powers, I don't think, so you wonder whether they're going in a different direction with him. But
yeah, it'll be a little bit like he's a smart kid. He'll have some tech and some
true.
Some support along
he's still
the way,
got to put that
he's
to use. He's still the man in the chair type of thing.
Yeah.
He knows his way around new age tech.
Yeah,
it's a good point. So it could be a mix of both.
Yeah, kind of across.
A new, like we're saying, like a new iteration of Hobgoblin, right?
Now that we've taken a look at some of the more fun aspects of the movie, let's take a look at, let's jump into more of a character study on Miles himself.
Yeah, he's a complicated cat.
Yeah, makes a lot of questionable decisions.
Yeah, I mean, he's a kid, right? Navigating the aspects of being a teenager is hard enough, let alone trying to navigate being Spider-Man at the same time. So he's got a lot on his plate early on. And as a child of immigrants, too, I'm sure that hasn't been easy.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably faced some roadblocks and barriers there in his life. So I know there's not too much in the way of the movie on like background of like racial barriers he could have faced, but you have to understand that that's probably been an aspect of his life that he's dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
If not his parents through him, right?
You mean that like that would help him as Spider-Man?
Yeah, exactly.
Not
like,
as an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the there would be like an inherent patience. Like I'm sure there'd be some level of like, okay, he would understand to like slow it down a bit with this guy and have
some de-escalatory techniques.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, have some of that more like negotiative behavior and kind of deal with this
as a pacifist
easily and peacefully as possible.
Yeah, that's fair. I was also thinking like just a deep like resilience for the hardships that you'd face as Spider-Man. And just a respect for the little guy too, right? Like friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He sees someone moving furniture or something, he'll grab the couch and carry it for him, type of thing. So yeah, I think it helps connect with the population a bit more too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has a bit more of an active persona as Spider-Man with the public than the other Spider-Man Prime does.
Yeah,
little less divided from the general public, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more maybe feels more intertwined. More not that Prime Spider-Man isn't passionate about his neighborhood protecting Queens, but I feel like Miles has. We can see, at least in the movie, a much deeper, or at least in any iteration that Miles is in. I'm thinking of the games too. Like he just has such a deep connection to his neighborhood and his culture, and that's something that we don't necessarily see as much with Prime Spider-Man or other iterations of Peter Parker.
Yeah.
So it's nice. It's refreshing. It helps round out the character and make him unique, set him apart from what Peter is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a gripe I have about Miles though, the guy always keeps his shoes untied. That's got to be like disastrous as Spider-Man. You got to tie those suckers up if you're swinging around the city. Like that falls off your foot, bang, hits someone 300 feet below. Yeah, I don't think you're wrestling with whether you can be Spider-Man anymore at that point.
Yeah, you better hope he's wearing them a size too small or something. Yeah. Stay on nice and snug.
Yeah. That seems impractical. Even not as Spider-Man.
Well, that's the thing.
Kind of an odd design choice.
Impractical not as Spider-Man than it does as Spider-Man.
True, because you'd be walking around tripping on the laces.
Yeah.
You're not doing much walking as Spider-Man necessarily.
Not if you're doing it right, anyway.
Yeah.
Not how I would be doing it.
Like you were saying, you'd exclusively be swinging around the city.
I'd never walk again.
Yeah.
I would go from swinging to skateboarding.
It's for peasants at that point.
Would be awesome, actually. Bring my skateboard with me and just switch in between.
You just strap a snowboard to your feet and snowboard through the sky type of thing.
That might work.
As you're swinging.
That might work. We got some ideas here. We do
hit
have
some grinds and stuff on the edges of building facades.
Yeah, that might be nice. Off some fire escapes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll test out the web shooters we got and see how much weight they can hold. Those suction cups are pretty decent.
Yeah.
They'll hold up.
I don't know if they're necessarily rated for any specific weight, but we could...
We'll find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that Miles not tying his shoes seems about as impractical as me trying to swing with toy web shooters.
Yeah.
Just all around bad call. But I guess he loses the shoes eventually on his suit anyway. He just goes with...
Not in the first movie, I guess.
Not in the first one.
Right? Like he keeps that with his aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he gets the full spandex in the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miles has a lot of complicated relationships in his life, too. Complicated, not necessarily in a bad way. Maybe, I don't know if you were interpreting that with any sense of connotation to the word. But just a big complicated relationship in his life would probably be with his dad, just given his position as an authority figure in the neighborhood, but also as an authority figure as his dad and a loving person in his life. And like, what are your thoughts on his relationship with his father and what that means to him as a character, how that's impacted him?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what the first movie is based around, right? Like, as much as there's a lot going on in Into the Spider-Verse, that A story really is Miles' relationship with his dad, and the Great Expectations thing is the through line for kind of that whole movie, and that's most prominent or most displayed in his relationship with his dad.
He wrestles with his dad's expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which fair. Like he does have very high expectations of him, and of course Miles is capable of accomplishing things to that level and much greater than that, as we see. But it really is that without that relationship and that kind of turning point with his dad, he'd never be able to, take on that mantle and embrace that the Spider-Man in him.
Yeah, no, I think his dad acts through him in a lot of ways, right? Like teaches him a lot of probably underlying personality traits that make him capable of taking on the mantle of Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like his strength and determination and tenacity as, a police officer and just a deeply caring individual who wants the best for his family, and those are traits that are characteristic of Spider-Man and of Miles through his father. So I think that relationship is super important to him, but it's got to be tough because I think that Miles understands in the first movie that he is capable of his father's expectations, but he doesn't necessarily know what brings him fulfillment in life, so he's not sure if his dad expects him to go a specific path, and if he navigates away from, strays off that path, and maybe is he still meeting those expectations, but sacrificing fulfillment to do that. Well, and how does that relationship help govern Miles's view of authority, do you think?
I think there's kind of a twofold way to look at it. On the one hand, it's, it establishes that inherent respect for authority and an understanding of how to carry yourself as an authority figure. But on the other side of that, there's kind of that rebellious nature because it's your dad as an authority figure, like as a teenager, kind of starting
naturally
into that rebellion,
testing the boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that adds into how he interacts with his dad and how he interacts with other authority figures, and as Spider-Man, how he interacts with the police and the criminals and all that. And that kind of rebellious nature, of course, is fostered by Uncle Aaron more than anybody else, and not just the rebellion, but the creativity and that passion, that following what you love, but breaking into the subway station there to throw up the graffiti, all of the wrong choices from his dad's perspective, but it was a necessary event for Miles. He needed to
growth
experience
for his character.
that. Yeah, he needed to kind of get that out there. And
it's probably some pent up energy. Can't step a toe out of line with your dad as a cop, and he probably is watching like a hawk, and he wants the best for you. So there's also that aspect of you don't want to let him down, but it's also like he's extra aware, hyper aware because of his profession. That's got to be difficult for sure. So it's nice for Miles to have an Uncle Aaron to kind of let him expend that energy, that creative energy, and maybe somewhat rebellious energy, like you said. And it's funny that kind of like enhances his authority as Spider-Man too, that you're inherently like a vigilante. So there is that rebellious nature to the job, right? As much as there's a bit more of a distinction with Batman or something where it's a darker take and he's really beating guys to a pulp, and Spider-Man is much more like, I'll pull my punches just enough to like tie you up and leave you for the cops type of thing, whereas Batman is like, I'll break every bone in your body so that you're never going to commit a crime again type of thing, because you'll be physically incapable of doing so.
Yeah, the consequences are so much worse.
Yeah, not like where Kingpin, you send him to prison and he gets out because he's pulling strings from the background and he has so many connections, and like he's not, in such bad shape that he literally can't do his thing anymore. So I think it's helpful to have that rebellious kind of nature be like Uncle Aaron helping facilitate.
Yeah, that influence being being present for Miles is an essential part of.
Yeah, him fostering that in Miles is important for him becoming Spider-Man.
We can't talk about his Miles influences without touching on Rio Morales too. She's particularly, she in the second movie of this franchise and Across the Spider-Verse, it's done a little better, but she's done a bit dirty in the first one. That she's just kind of there. She's a bit of a warm body in the first one, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd characterize it as she's done dirty, but like she's definitely given a back seat. Doesn't really play a huge role, like you said before. It's the first movie was much more about his relationship with his dad.
Yeah.
Not to say that his mother's influence isn't important to Miles too. We just maybe don't see that as overtly.
Yeah, like
in the movie,
in the game especially, you see it much more like that. That unconditional love, emotional support, the maternal traits. Her influence seems much larger on him.
Yeah, it looms much larger. Yeah.
Yeah, in that than it does in this franchise. But of course, in the second one, they have, there's a lot more focus on Rio and Miles.
Yeah, I remember there being a much more poignant scenes. Yeah, better characteristic of like that deep emotional connection between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we know that exists and that has been there since, that was in there in the first movie. We just get to see it exposed a little more in the second, which I was happy to see because in the games, obviously in the games it's a little bit of a different story because Miles' dad is already dead at that point. So his mother is a single mother.
Plays a bigger role naturally,
Yeah. Takes on more responsibility and is, helping shape him both as a human but also as a man too, right? Like something that maybe would be regulated more to the father, but if he's not around, then the mother helps to take on that responsibility too.
And like everything else, it's a massive benefit to him, those traits that he gets from and he learns from his mother, like the empathy and the emotional intelligence. Like it would be so innate already when he's dealing with, these kind of misunderstood criminals and, these types that aren't doing this for a bad reason. Like they don't have ill intent for the crimes they're committing. It's just they're up against the wall. They've gotten to this point.
Yeah, you don't necessarily know everyone's story. Like Sandman's a great example, right?
Yeah,
like very conflicted character where he's trying to protect his daughter, and it's you can connect with those feelings a little bit more, and you can see where Miles would be coming from when he's, like you said before, trying to go more negotiative route where he's reasoning with people and de-escalate situations and as little violence as possible type of thing. And I think, like you said, those traits are as important as what his father's able to give him. It helps separate him from going back to the distinction between Spider-Man and Batman too. Batman didn't have that kind of ability to pull his punch a little bit and reason with someone and a little bit of a softer side, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But Spider-Man has that, and I think or Miles has that, and I think that's in large part due to his mother.
Yeah.
Both his parents obviously loom large in his life, clearly, and help round him out as a human and as Spider-Man too, and helps him live up to that, what that really means, and makes him effective in doing so. So flipping back just to the scene with Aaron and the graffiti where Miles goes into the sewer there, I think that's a really important scene in the movie for multiple reasons. Obviously, like we talked about with the viewers, getting to see like what Aaron does for Miles in terms of helping to stimulate that creativity and rebellious nature that can often be helpful to him.
Mm-hmm.
But also that's where he gets bit by the spider and starts his transformation. And that scene itself is kind of funny, like the build up to it, the kind of menacing nature of this glowing spider, the threat of it, and it's climbing real close to Miles all over him. You're just waiting for it to bite. And then when it does, it's just sort of this like anticlimactic swatting the thing away.
Yeah, just bats it away like it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Like a glowing blue spider is no big deal.
Well, what, like, does that not seem out of character for Miles? Like a pretty observant and intelligent individual doesn't take a glowing spider as sort of like, should I be concerned here?
Yeah, you'd think, yeah, he's a smart kid, and, pretty much anything in nature that's vibrant and blue is poison, so.
There'd have to be some cause for worry.
Yeah, maybe a little bit would be good, but not from him, I guess. He's got no problem with it.
He seems to go about his life pretty normally after that.
Yeah. He must have just thought getting bit by the spider would let him meet the turtles or something in that sewer.
Yeah.
Michelangelo would be waiting for him.
Oh, he'd be helping with the graffiti.
Yeah, that's for sure, actually.
Supplying the pizza.
Yeah.
Donatello and Prowler could be having some conversations about new tech.
Some tech discussion, yeah. Raphael would just be sulking.
He'd be brooding somewhere.
Like usual.
Yeah.
Leonardo would be chastising them for the graffiti in the first
place.
Let's
get training, guys. Come on.
Let's check out what the Spider Kid can do.
Yeah, no, that would be an interesting meet for sure. Or an interesting team up. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man or Miles Morales and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
It'd be quite the crossover, yeah. How do you think Miles would take that? A bunch of mutant turtles, but humanoid turtles, I guess.
Like at that point in his life, in his character's story, when he goes down to the sewers there, like before he gets bit or after he gets bit type of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he would be stunned and shocked and, am I hallucinating type of thing. But
yeah, probably.
Afterwards, once he starts meeting all the spider people and stuff, I would say that it probably doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility that...
Yeah, well, because by that point he's already met, like, Green Goblin, like the monster Green Goblin, and who else that like, kind of not
Scorpion or Tombstone. He's kind of like
Tombstone's kind of inhuman.
I don't know if he's met him yet at that point, though.
Yeah, in the Collider room there.
Okay.
When Spider-Man dies, or when Spider-Man Prime dies.
Right.
So yeah, he's seen some, not normal individuals. Like, he knows there's some biological fuckery going on.
Sure.
And of course, Spider-Man himself.
And Spider-Man himself, yeah, absolutely.
I think they'd be buddies, though. I think him and Mikey'd get along. I think him and Donatello would get along as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Leonardo's kind of like Spider-Man Prime, too, so maybe they'd get along. It would just be Raphael.
I think Leonardo, maybe it would be like a little too, like, I'll take this kid under my wing, but like he's maybe a bit childish or...
Yeah, he'd
prefer Not that Miles doesn't mature, but maybe at that point he's still like, a young kid, and Leo is maybe looking for more mature allies.
Yeah, he'd rather hang out with Spider-Man Prime.
Exactly,
Peter Parker.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a fun team up, though. It's like the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, but TMNT and Spider-Man.
Yeah. From the first to the second movie, how do you think obviously the animation style changed a little bit, especially with, as we mentioned, with each character kind of having their own semi-distinct animation, and this one, especially the intro, being more focused on Gwen. How do you think that impacted the movie? Do you think did you notice the difference? Was it a little more jarring than the first one? Or?
Yeah, I felt it felt a bit more polished or something. Which sounds like it would be a good thing, but in my head it kind of detracted from me a little bit. I liked the sort of choppier, sloppier nature of the first one. Like, it was a little bit, there was something nice about that. This one, I don't necessarily know if I'm even right, but it just felt to me like they were paying more attention to really, really finer detail, contouring, blending and stuff, and I kind of appreciated the more like bombastic nature of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think that like that takes much away from my opinion on the movie. I just thought, like, why mess with a good thing type of thing? Like, I don't think you need to address that too much. Focus on maybe other gaps that may exist, because that wasn't one of them from the first movie.
Right.
But what did you think? Do you feel similarly or differently?
Yeah, I think it was distinctly different, and like you said, I think it was very noticeable right from the start. Like you could tell immediately. But I don't know. I think it added to the movie a bit more, just because the tone was a bit different in the second one. The tone, and maybe it's funny that you describe it as polished, because the tone maybe felt a bit more polished or something than the first one, which I think makes sense with the aesthetic of the first one. Like, it's very much learning the ropes and figuring this out, and kind of, you have those training wheels on. This one, it's like, okay, training wheels are removed. This is full pace, like practicing at full speed kind of thing.
Yeah, it felt like pedal to the metal from the first one.
Which, you're right. I don't think, like you said, I don't think it was necessarily a good thing, but I think, or a good thing as the viewer, but I think from a storytelling perspective, like from a cinematography standpoint, I think that does make sense.
Yeah, I guess you don't want too much, like, you're not going to put out a movie where it's like another like lead up to Miles discovering who he needs to be. Like, you're throwing him to the wolves. In the next one, he understands, he's picked up the mantle of Spider-Man. He has a loose understanding of what he needs to do to protect his neighborhood, but the stakes are much, much larger in the second one, as we come to realize.
Yeah. If you need some way of knowing that the stakes are high in this movie, calling on Lego Spider-Man has gotta be the number one indicator. That guy is a god.
Their best agent.
Unreal, yeah.
No wonder.
Yeah. How could he not? Just a critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that was a hilarious moment. And just when you think, like, it couldn't get any crazier with Spider-Ham.
Yeah.
You throw Lego Spider-Man in there. It's just like, it's such a great little nod.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it feels reductive to say it, but that might be like the highlight of this movie is the Lego Spider-Man shout out. It's not even that I'm a big Lego guy, it's just that was so unexpected and so well done.
Watch him come back as like this pivotal character or something in the next one.
He'll come back in like the next MCU Spider-Man movie.
Yeah. Well, they did say he was their best agent, so
who knows if there's any what do they call them? Canon events to fix in MCU Spider-Man.
He's their guy.
You gotta send the best.
Yeah.
Speaking of MCU Spider-Man, that call out early on in the second one that Miguel O'Hara mentions Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man from Earth 99999 or something. He says have been messing with the multiverse. I can't remember exactly what he says.
Yeah,
but it just watching that now with the state of the MCU, it just ages like milk a bit. Like, at the time, I feel like, I don't remember it specifically, but I feel like I remember hearing that and being like, that is a sick reference. So glad they had that in there.
Yeah.
But with disappointment after disappointment, it's just like, oh, really twisting the knife a bit.
Look at it in a vacuum then. Like, at the time it came out, don't look at it in retrospect, knowing what you know about how it unfolded with the MCU.
Yeah,
and
I should have
done
done
dip
that.
in quality.
Too late now.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. It ages a little bit poorly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there is even more direct connection to the MCU or the Prime timeline with Childish Gambino's iteration of Prowler.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild. That
connection
has a lot
to
of
make, like the implication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's intended to be the same. I mean, obviously, I shouldn't say I don't know if the intention is that you're not supposed to know, but, you know, if that's MCU Prowler, like if that's the same guy that was given info to Spider-Man in Homecoming, then that's huge.
Yeah.
And I guess it should be too, right? Do we know his name's Davis in Spider-Man Homecoming? I think
Aaron
we
Davis.
know. We don't know his first name, but we
Yeah,
know
we
his
know
last
it's
name.
Aaron, I think.
Do we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. In that case,
Well, I mean, I guess we don't know that that's the same because Miles refers to an Uncle Aaron.
No,
Or sorry.
he refers to having a nephew in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
In Homecoming, but I don't know if they know his name is Aaron Davis.
Okay.
Either
way,
sure.
I you have to.
You want to believe it, yeah.
At least from a separate universe, I guess. But it was cool to see him costumed up in the gear.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was pretty bitchin'.
Calling back to our discussions on Miles's relationship with his dad from the first movie, how do you think that's changed, transformed from the first to the second?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have a deeper connection in this one than they did in the first, or maybe not a deeper connection, but a better mutual understanding of each other. Like, they both know what each other needs, and
they were kind of opposed in this movie, though.
True.
Like, on opposite paths. Miles was really struggling with, like, he couldn't do right by his dad and still be Spider-Man just because the responsibility of both the expectations of his dad and the expectations of Spider-Man were just too much for one guy to handle, to manage.
Yeah, but I think from his dad's perspective, he's done a much, I shouldn't say better job, because it was just a different lane he took in the first one to get to the same area, but he's much more supportive of, or shouldn't say, because he was supportive in the first one, just not in a less direct way. Maybe in this one, he's more
I think
directly supportive of the decisions he's making in the moment and what's happening right now. In the first one, he's very supportive of where Miles is going to go and where he's helping him get where he needs to be.
Yeah, he's trying to make the best decisions for Miles, whereas in the second one, he's trying to help Miles make the best decisions for himself.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. I get what you mean, like offering like a different kind of support in that way. And I think it's a kind of unconditional support too, right? Because Miles's dad can sense that there's something he doesn't know, right? Like that Miles is doing. There's something that's like taking up a lot of his time that he's clearly passionate about, that he's not able to put time into like his school or not being present in that aspect of his life. So, there's probably some concern on that front, but also like some pride in, okay, well, maybe he's doing something that's really like he can express himself and like finding his path type of thing. So he wants to be supportive of that without really knowing what's truly going on, because he can't reveal that he's Spider-Man. So it's that unconditional support too that we see from him.
Yeah.
And like the first movie, the relationship with the father is maybe more present than relationship with the mother, but I think they balance that in this movie more too, right? With Rio's kind of more poignant, pivotal scenes with Miles, where there's that true like expressing of emotion, but more the relationship with his dad being like his quest as a hero. That's intertwined with his dad, right? What do you think? How does Miles and his dad, how does their relationship parallel Gwen and her father's in the second movie? Or what's different about those two? Like,
a lot, yeah. Yeah, it is a much different relationship. Obviously, Gwen's dad, single parent, much different
dynamic,
yeah, between the two of them than it is the three in Miles' case. Obviously similar in obvious ways. The dads are both cops. Gwen's dad's a captain. Jeff, of course, on his way to the same place. But yeah, I guess they differ more than they are similar. I think in Gwen's dad's case, he doesn't really know what he's doing. And I don't mean that in an insulting way.
As a parent?
As a parent, yeah. Like, he's struggling to do this by himself, and he...
Sort of lost.
Yeah, it seems that he has an understanding that, like, he doesn't have all the answers to these questions, and he's navigating all of this on his own is really, really weighing on him.
Sure.
So I think, Jeff obviously has more support in that arena than he does
with Rio.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a young girl, like, not having her mother around.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, on the flip side, do you think Miles not having his father, like, I know we've seen it in the game, but this iteration of Miles, if the roles were reversed type of thing, like, do you think Miles would be a more tortured individual if he lost his father? Like, Gwen seems, fairly well adjusted despite the trauma. Not diminishing her trauma, but she seems, like she's found a coping mechanism that's worked for her to endure that kind of pain and suffering. What are your thoughts on if the roles were reversed and if Miles had lost his dad? Because we also see at the end of this movie, spoilers, like, we see an iteration of Miles that's lost his father.
That's what's gonna happen. Or that's what's on track to happen.
A dark version of Miles, yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you, like, I don't know, what does that speak to Gwen's strength as an individual too? Like, is she more resilient than Miles is? Could you speak to that? Your thoughts on that?
It is hard to say, because we do see iterations of Miles, not in this, but in the game particularly, and in other franchises, that he does lose his dad, and that is what's supposed to happen, and he still does rise above it and become Spider-Man, as opposed to, the teaser we see at the end of the second one with him becoming the Prowler and that other version of him. So it's hard to say if it would be different, because ultimately in the third one, this is a bit of theory crafting, I guess, right now, but rather than talk in ifs, I'll just say when Jeff dies in the third movie that's upcoming, that's still gonna happen. That's a canon. Yeah, that has to happen for Miles' development as Spider-Man and as a result as a person. Yeah. And he'll rise above that, as he should, and continue to take that mantle of Spider-Man. So I don't think Jeff's death would be the, I guess, the canon event for Miles being bad or good. I think Miles was a good person, and he was bitten by the spider and remains to be a good person despite what happens. He wouldn't, he wouldn't turn to a side of evil because of his dad's death, to cope with his dad's death.
But that is what we have to understand from the Prowler version of Miles, right?
Yeah,
like,
but
that is a canon event in his life, and he's turned to the dark side now.
Yeah, but I think in that case, that Miles is a product of that Prowler Miles is a product of his world, not of, his parents and his household and his neighborhood. It's that New York without Spider-Man has become a place where he's fostered into this life of nefarious activities and crime. And
so Spider-Man is the kicker for you, in the sense that if there was a Spider-Man at all, then he wouldn't be the Prowler version, or he has to become the Spider-Man. Like, let's say there's a Peter Parker out there that's Spider-Man. Does Miles still become Prowler version? Or is it only when that Miles gets bitten by the spider that he avoids becoming Prowler, taking that path?
Well, no, it's because the spider that Miles is bitten by is from that Dimension 42. So that Peter Parker as Spider-Man never exists in that universe. So it creates, a New York City, like in Taxi Driver, that's just crime riddled. And
Yeah, okay. Like no one can
The
rise
scum.
above.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
my Prowler Miles is created as a product of that, as opposed to the Miles Spider-Man that we see that wasn't supposed to get bitten, who, was raised in a world where there was a Spider-Man and where this crime could be stamped out by somebody and there was somebody to rise above it. And, that in combination with his parents and, other influences, his friends and other family, have created an environment that he can become Spider-Man as opposed to one that fostered that other side.
Yeah. Well, do you think the good version of Miles, is going to be able to get through to the Prowler version of Miles in the upcoming film because of that? Like explaining that, the other side, his side of the story of things could have been different. Like in your core, you're this person, you're a product of your environment, but you can change that. What are your speculations on that? Think it's going to be a bloodbath? One of them's not coming out alive.
No, I don't think it's going to be a bloodbath. Honestly, based on how these,
I guess I'm asking is it going to be like, is our Miles going to turn him good type of thing? Like in the end, send him back to his universe with a different perspective. And he's like, you know what? This Prowler thing, like I'm doing, like I have a lot of power and resource here, but I can use them for better things.
I don't know. It's a good question.
It's hard to
Better
say
question
until
that
you
I
see.
have an answer for. It kind of depends on how the rest of the story goes. Like if the focus of that movie is Miles versus Miles.
I mean, you have to assume, right, that in some part that's going to play into the movie. Like if they
No,
left
but I mean like
this on a cliffhanger,
if
of
he's
that.
like a first act villain, like they dispatch of him and
Yeah,
move on
I'm not
to a bigger
saying
enemy.
he couldn't be, but there's still going to have to be that resolvement of the like it's leading to an argument between the two characters, right? They're going to have opposing views.
Mm-hmm.
Like we see that in the last scene of the second movie here, Across the Spider-Verse. So we know that the next movie is going to pick up as like, okay, well, how did our Miles get out of the situation he's in, like to get through to this Prowler version that's intent on, you're an anomaly. I assume he knows that, or he's going to find out that, his chance at being Spider-Man has been stolen from our Miles. Well, in a way.
Not him. It would have been Peter Parker.
Well, it could have been Miles. It's not like when Miguel calls our Miles an anomaly. I guess you could take that to mean like Miles Morales being bit as to become Spider-Man is an anomaly, but you could also just take it as in some universes it could be Miles, just like it could be Penny Parker in the future or whatever.
Right.
And in these two universes, it could still have been Miles in both. Or sorry, it could still have been Miles in the Prowler version of the universe, and that chance was stolen from him by our Miles.
Right. Yeah.
So there's going to be that aspect. Like they're going to butt heads, I guess, is my point. So
sure,
there's going to have to be some aspect of like on an ethical, moral level, how do you get through to someone like that? Your complete mirror.
Yeah, well, we'll find out in 2026.
Mm-hmm. The reveal of him not being in the universe he thinks he's in is wild to me after like having the discussion with his mom and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty mind-blowing. I mean, I think anybody with a pulse was surprised by that. That was just a wild twist.
Yeah.
Even because of course this is not the first time I've seen this, and I remembered it well enough, but I kind of forgot that happened.
Yeah.
Like when he was talking to his mom, I was expecting what everybody expected. Like I was expecting that was his mom, and he was gonna tell her he was Spider-Man, and this big emotional moment. But yeah, I had totally forgot that was the way this movie wrapped up. Like I forgot that happened. So even the second time around, or maybe even third time around, it still caught me.
Yeah, it was a great way to subvert expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it capped off what was definitely like, I don't know, what are your, in my opinion, I didn't think the second one quite matched the first.
No, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say the second one was bad by any means. Like, I'm not going to say it was a bad movie, but compared to the first one, like, there is no comparison there. The first one is
No,
a
it's
league
like a good
above.
continuation of what that story was, but as
Mm-hmm.
like the introduction to that new character, Miles Morales, as the introduction to this new crazy art style medium that hasn't really been used in like film and television before. I think it's like, in a league of its own. Sequels are tricky too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Of course.
And like I said, this is a continuation of that story too. So it's sort of like there's connective tissue there, and you could see it as one larger thing, especially with the third one coming, making it a trilogy. But as the intro to that story in a vacuum, I think, yeah, it's leagues above what this one was.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was necessary for the second one, I guess,
Yeah, and just like I think the third one will be necessary for the second one.
as like a culmination of Miles's story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think this was. I think this movie was supposed to be a part of the third one. It
Yeah,
doesn't
like
feel like it was
pitched
supposed
as
to
a
be its
three-part
own.
thing.
Yeah, or even like after Into the Spider Verse came out and had blew up so much success. Whoever was in charge of that pitching the next movie to the production company or whoever it was pitched this as, yeah, we're going to do two more of these. Like, this is going to be the second one, this is going to be the third one, or the basis for it anyway.
Yeah, and if that's the case, there'd be a lot more, at least in my mind, there'd be a lot more priority on like making the first one like really like set the mark
Mm-hmm.
early. Second one, you can kind of like, find your groove, have some experimentation with how to tinker with making things better or different or play with some things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one, you can cap it off with a bang, hopefully. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
that's.
know exactly what to expect, but hopefully they, like you were saying, culminate with a sense of, feeling like this character's story is now complete and
Mm-hmm.
it's been this kind of roller coaster, and now we've come to the end of that.
Yeah, like I think it's not to take away from the second one, but I think there's great moments in that movie, and if they can capitalize for the third one on the greatness of the first movie and the great moments in the second one, we're in for a masterpiece of a film.
Do you think they need to ground it a bit more? Like, do you think the large scale, the large stakes of the second one, like, do you think we need to come back, reel it back in a little bit to like more like New York, like Hell's Kitchen Daredevil style, just protecting like your own block, your own family type of thing?
Yeah. Do do I think they need to? Maybe. Can they? No, not really. Like, even just looking at it from the title alone, like, the title is reported as Beyond the Spider Verse, so I don't think they're like, it's not intended to be a more grounded take, and I don't think it was ever gonna be like it was always. If this movie was, or if Into the Spider Verse was intended as a trilogy, it was always supposed to be like we get bigger at each step. Would it be nice to have some more grounded stuff? Probably, and I think we will see that with kind of the tribulations with Miles' dad and how that canon event ends up shaking down. If I assume we'll see that. Um, but no, I think the purpose is to get grander in scale for each of
Okay.
these movies.
It's interesting that you interpret it like the title that way, Beyond the Spider Verse, is increasing the grandiosity of the scale and the stakes. Because I maybe could, not necessarily that I do interpret it this way, but it could be interpreted as like Beyond the Spider Verse, like despite the Spider Verse being a thing and these wild things going on, like we saw in the second, and these
Mm-hmm.
big, interweaving dimensions and all these crazy things going on, we're going to reel it back into this is a much more personal battle now, right? Miles is literally battling with himself
Mm-hmm.
and what he could have became in different circumstances. So I think that is an opportunity to kind of like bring it back in and look at it as a much more deeper character study, like looking at Miles's personal struggles and how his family has shaped him and how that's going to really like power him through. So yeah, it could go either way, right? Like that's, I guess, the beauty's in the title too. It could be interpreted as either way, and they've opened the door to do it both ways too, with both the first movie and the second movie, and the tease sort of with Prowler Miles as an influence for the third. Not that that's what the entire story is necessarily going to be based around, but it'll be at least an element of that, right? That personal battle, that literal struggle within that's, now extrapolated to a different human being in a different set of circumstances, but is truly your mirror. Are there any parts of the two films that you feel are incomplete, or do you have any like unanswered questions going into the third that you'd like to see addressed?
Well, Venom, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing that Venom hasn't been a part of... Like, an animated Venom is just so cool.
Is it because like Sony's doing like the Tom Hardy thing at that time, so it's...
I don't even know if they would have the rights to Venom when making these Spider-Verse movies.
Maybe
or
not.
If that's exclusive to Sony's live-action productions, or... I don't know. That might be a contract thing, but... an animated Venom is so sick. The purple glow almost. So dope.
A wild tongue, dripping spit.
Yeah.
And the kind of like the active symbiote, like as if it's
it's moving around
in motion. Yeah. Okay, so Venom's high up on your list. I mean, that's probably likely beyond the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, no, it's not a big stretch, I don't think. Unless there is like a contractual issue there. But who knows? That's information I don't have access to anyway. But was there something in particular that you were hoping to find, to see?
Well, I guess I wonder if there's going to be like a passing of the torch or something. Like, do you continue with Miles's character after that, or do you kind of transition into a new character? Do we look at Gwen a little deeper? Is there, I don't know, probably going to be like a Gwen Miles team up maybe if they continue to pursue the character of Miles. Maybe try and divert it into a more of a team up thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see them check out another, like, this is even thinking beyond that's a bad choice of words. This is even thinking beyond the Spider-Verse. But yeah, I'd love to see them explore, like, rather than do a fourth movie on Miles or something, or use one of these characters to do a spin-off, which I'd be happy with as well, but I think it'd be cool to see them look at a different character entirely in this, like, animated comic book format. So the last thing on our checklist here for our Spider-Verse discussion is where this ends up on our tier list. Bit of an interesting case with this one. Or rather with this two, just because
2 for 1.
Austin Powers, it was a little easier to rank all three of them as a unit. But with this one, we have two pretty individual stories, two differing levels of quality. So we are gonna rate these ones separately. So I'll ask Aiden first. Where would Into the Spider-Verse be going on your tier list?
Into the Spider-Verse, the first movie.
Yeah.
Like we've said with our discussion earlier, everything about this movie made it feel like it was such a new venture into new territory that hadn't been explored in the film industry before. So the anticipation was growing and people didn't necessarily know what to expect and didn't, like we were saying earlier, maybe didn't take it as seriously as what a new live action Spider-Man could have been. And it just delivering so well on using that medium to its advantage and really embracing it, regardless of how it might come off. As long as you embrace it and you believe in it, it'll work. And you could really tell they took great care in making sure that that passion came through. And for that, I'll give it ultimate praise. I'll put it in greatest of all time because it was a huge monumental change for the industry, or could be potentially, right? If there's more movies made in this style, like you could point to that being kind of the introduction of what that means for the industry.
Yeah, no, it was a masterpiece. It still is. It's great on all the important aspects. Emotionally, it's fantastic. It's inspiring. It hits all those right notes. It's cinematically, it's fantastic. The setting it's very real, despite it being very comic booky, and like the streets feel alive, and the scale of the buildings feels correct, and the way he swings is, I'm not a physics guy, but it feels correct to our earthly understanding of
it's definitely
gravity
based
and how
in
we
reality,
move.
despite the art style. Yeah,
and just exactly like you said, it just did this in a way that no other film had before it, and really no other film has yet. And so for that reason, I'd put it right at the top of greatest films of all time there.
Is this our first GOAT tier film?
It is indeed, yeah. Unanimously decided greatest films of all time. I'm happy to have it there. I mean, it's gonna be. So I think that's gonna be right at the top of the list for quite some time.
Yeah, it's the new benchmark.
Yeah,
I'm comfortable with it there. That brings us to the second iteration, Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, that's where we get a little less nice, maybe.
Further down the list on that one, eh?
Yeah, that one's a bit of a. No, it's not a bad movie.
It's not a bad movie.
Absolutely
I just think they were trying to do too much with it.
Yeah.
And they thought they could because of the success of the first, and
I respect
there
the
was
effort.
redeemable qualities there, right? I just think the story and characters, and I just think the first one was more compelling.
Yeah. It just, the first one casts such a shadow, and in a lot of cases you kind of have to look at it, at each property as their own thing. I think for the MCU trilogies, it's a lot easier to look at. Captain America: The First Avenger is its own movie. The Winter Soldier is its own movie. One is distinctly better than the other. But in this,
it's like there's between the movies, there's like growth that happens between the movies. And then we pick up sort of after some growth has taken place, and we see a character that has grown a bit that is now going to struggle with some new challenges in his life. Whereas the Spider-Verse ones here, it's like there's a continued connective tissue of growth that happens between the films, as opposed to like a hard stop between movies and then picking up at a new kind of stage in this character's life. Spider-Verse, there's too much connective tissue there, where like Miles had the grounded level challenge in the first movie and much more personal motivations. And then in the second movie, the universe just expands so much, and like he realizes that there's so much more out there, and he's so small in all of this, and the scale gets huge, and it just gets a bit like convoluted and harder to understand how to connect with characters on a deeper emotional level when the universe is now like there's thousands, tens of thousands of spider people that are now potentially in the mix.
Yeah, it muddies the waters a bit.
Yeah.
So I think for that reason and for that discussion, I think this is fair in the needs some work category.
No, yeah, I'd agree. Needs some work for that one. So we got GOAT tier for Into the Spider-Verse and needs some work for Across the Spider-Verse. And the verdict is still out on Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, we'll check back with you and get that one on the tier list when whenever it releases. With that, thanks for listening, everybody. If you have any thoughts or concerns about any of our comments today, let us know. You can reach us at Fratnatics on Twitter or Fraternal Fanatics everywhere else.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback. As you saw at the beginning of the episode, we love to address listener feedback. So if you have questions, then post them anywhere on our socials at Fratnatics on Twitter, at Fraternal Fanatics anywhere else. And please leave us your questions. And we'd love to take some time in an episode of our podcast to address those questions as best they fit with a movie that we're covering that week.
Yeah, or if you have a movie to suggest, we'd be happy to, fit that into our schedule anywhere we can.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks for listening.